Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Ad Age Remotely. I'm Jeanine Poggi, Senior Editor here at Ad Age. And today I'm joined live with Pam Drucker Mann, Chief Revenue Officer at Conde Nast. Hi, Pam.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
So for anyone watching at home, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on our social channels, and we'll try to get to them as we have our conversation. And a special thank you to Ad Colony for supporting this episode of Ad Age Remotely. So Pam, where are you working from currently?
I'm working from my home in Brooklyn, and I've been here for the last, I think, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks, like everybody else, with my wife and my 3 little boys, and just doing it like everybody else is.
Yeah, you have 3 right under the age of 10. What's that sort of been like, you guys managing schedules and schooling and Zoom
Right.
calls and all of that?
Yeah, it's every version of panic attack you can imagine. At any moment, you might see my kids could run in here and basically photobomb this entire podcast. So, I mean, it is like it's pushed every level of patience anyone could possibly imagine. Someone said to me the other day, like, Pam, if it feels impossible, it's because it is. It's a lot. We've got 3 kids, virtual schooling. They got a lot of energy. Trying to run a business from home, and that's not even taking into account, managing a household and all the other things that I know we're all dealing with. So it has been unbelievably challenging and humbling, and exciting, and it's been all that all at one time.
Well, if they jump in, I'm happy to hand the reins over. I'll pull in my
Yeah.
5-year-old and my 10-month-old. They'll have a little party, and we can kind of just
Yeah.
sit back. So
They've gotten quite good at answering hard questions, so I may pull them in for any of the tough ones.
it hasn't changed, what the idea of, like, we were talking about professionalism and, the conversations you would have
Yeah.
perhaps, in lunch and breakfast meetings that you're now having over Zoom. Do you think that's changed, like, how you're connecting with clients right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the first time in my career that I've actually had meetings with clients with no shoes on. So I would say that professionalism is totally up in the air right now. This is the most dressed up I've gotten in a couple days. But yeah, I mean, I think about the fact that, like, we go to work every day. You put on a work uniform, you put on makeup, you wear like amazing shoes, and you go and see your clients, and there's this level of professionalism that I think we've all kind of just cultivated over the years, and maybe that conversation has stayed in a very kind of safe and guarded place because of that. And when you're at home, shoes off with your kids running around, it's hard to maintain that level of it's hard to not just be more vulnerable. And I think that's opened up totally different kinds of conversations with our clients. I was saying that there's clients I've known for 20 years that I've never known quite on the level that I've gotten to know them over this period of time. And there's something about that has been really amazing, to have like these very deep consultative conversations about work, but also, really just to connect on something that we're all going through together. And not just like the Corona crisis, but just, working from home and dealing with your kids and all of that. It's just unbelievably real.
Right.
So I think it's just, by nature, creating more real dialogue, which is nice.
Yeah. And look, I mean, from a business perspective, the publishing industry, media, of course, before all of this was in a state of flux to begin with. What
Right.
challenges have been, amplified during all of
Right.
this? And what are you sort of navigating right now that, you were already dealing with before, like COVID? How has it changed?
I mean, in some ways, I mean, the industry's been going through, as you said, I mean, going through a period of flux for, 3 or 4 years. And so I think we've all kind of gotten used to this idea of constant change. The idea that we're just like, okay, this is how consumers are going to react. This is the one platform they're going to watch, or this is the one brand they're going to like. I mean, I think that's all been thrown out the window over the last few years, where consumers have really, there's so much content for them to consume, and there's so many different platforms for them to experience, and so many different experiences in which for them to appreciate that experience. But so the fluidity of it all, I think we've gotten used to. I think the additional challenge has been, just this recognition that, we're in a health crisis, and it's created a lot of fear. And that's different than managing, consumer behavior in terms of like, oh, I prefer this brand over this brand. It's, consumers legitimately being quarantined in their homes, and that, really creating a challenge for the ad market in particular, in which, many of them didn't have creative that was even appropriate during this period of time. Many of them being put in positions in which they just had to press pause because of, budgetary issues, as many companies are dealing with. And so I think that's just like a whole other layer of challenge on top of the challenge we were already in. But I do think that there's there's something quite simple about it as well, which is like, look, I mean, our industry has gone through crises before, with 9/11 and the financial crisis in 2008. And I think, I think we have to just recognize that, we've always come through these moments, and, I think everyone's trying to predict what behavior is going to be and how it's going to change. And I think what we all need to, come together on is that, like, no one has those exact answers, and no one is going to have those answers until this plays out a little bit. And so I think that just plays into a little bit of the challenge, is people just want more declarative, like, this is what's going to happen when, so that they can start moving forward and putting plans together.
I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. There remains uncertainty. I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, nothing is going to be much clearer. But how do you work through that? What can you put in place now, or how do you prepare for not having the answers to those questions?
Well, in a weird way, it's kind of like you don't prepare, because what you really need to be is agile, right? You have to be fluid. You have to think about, like, I've had clients that have literally said to me yesterday, like, oh my God, we're going dark for the rest of the year. And then call me the next day and be like, we have to get in right now. So I think no, I mean, it's a little schizophrenic right now, because I think that's actually like the world that we're living in right now, right? I mean, this isn't just a US situation. This is happening everywhere. I think there's like a regional complexity to all of this. I think there's a fear complexity to all of this. I think there's a financial complexity to all of this. When all of that is happening, you have to recognize that the best plan is almost to take it day by day. And to really, I think from our perspective, what has given us sanity is really following the consumer. Ultimately, as a business, that is about making content and entertaining our consumer. We're learning a lot from them every second of every day. And so we've been really just working on our ad strategy in reference to that, quite frankly. And in some ways, that has changed day over day. And in some ways, it's showing us things that I think will set us up for the future.
So what behaviors are you seeing changing? Like, how are you guiding marketers then during this as consumer behavior? Where are they going towards?
I mean, I think some of the things are kind of intuitive, which is like, in the very beginning of the crisis, everyone was obsessed, and still is, I mean, with news, right? Everyone was just like, what is happening and how is it going to change, and like, what's happening tomorrow and how many cases are there? And so it's just consumers really obsessed with a certain, buying behavior, obviously with essential items, and a certain, content behavior in terms of just trying to get knowledge. But what we're starting to see is, obviously, like, as the new normal has set in, just as real people do adapt, consumers are starting to want to just be entertained. We're seeing huge increases, around our food content with brands like Bon Appetit, where we were already having success, but ultimately you're getting consumers that like now have to cook or want to understand or want to just be entertained and have fun. And we're seeing, lots of consumers shifting to fashion content and wanting to just, feel normal. At the end of the day, you can only absorb so much bad news, or just news in general. And so I think ultimately what's starting to happen there is, consumers are just leaning into all of their, what I would say is their normal passions, in addition to the fact that they're opening up some new ones. And so one of the things I would say that we've been telling our marketers is, listen, a couple of things are happening. Consumers are actually open to trying new things, because they, in some cases, have the time. They have to change their behavior. And when you have to change your behavior, it just opens yourselves up to new ways of thinking and an interest in trying things, which also means an opportunity to change brand preferences, right? Like, if you always use a certain type of something and it's not available, like, you're going to open yourself up to something else. And so brand preferences are changing, habits are changing, and just a willingness to try new things because of this, I would say, the circumstance that we're all in.
There's the opportunity. There's the opportunity to reach all of those people looking to make like sourdough bread starters. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, or also just because, like, you have to cook. If you're someone that always like went out for dinner, lots of people are. I mean, I love to go out for dinner. You're making dinner every night, and or even if you're bringing food in, it's like you have to really think differently about how you're going to spend your day. It's like Groundhog's Day every day to a certain extent, right? So I do feel like that's happening. I also would just say, like, just this redefinition of experiences, like this ideal that an experience was, when we talk about like doing something, going out to a concert or going to an event at school, like we've defined our experiences in very finite ways. And I think what's happening through this process is this redefinition of an experience. And so one of the other things that, is starting to happen is you've got moments in which kids are missing their proms or their commencements or their, or other kind of big kind of moments in their lives. And so, as a company, we have brands like Teen Vogue that are going to be hosting, the first ever virtual prom experiences. And so how do we still experience life through this crisis that we're all in? And there's a desire, I think is the point that I'd like to, bring back to marketers. There is a desire to have those experiences, even if it's in a new way. No one's like crawling under their beds and just wants to stay there till this is all over. People want to, they want to live, they want to enjoy their life. And so we have to find a new way to help them do that.
We have a couple of shout outs. I want to say hi to Catherine from Kenya, Kayanda from Tanzania, BJ from Connecticut, Francesco from Chile, Matt from New Jersey, and Ivana from Serbia. Thank you all for joining us. Switching gears a little bit, of course, it's been out there, the whole media industry and publishing are dealing with, how are you managing costs? There's been conversations around, layoffs and furloughs and things like that.
Sure.
At Conde Nast, how are you guys handling this, and what do you see as a way out of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, on the one end, first of all, it's a really good time to be in the content business because we've seen like a 40% increase in audience growth globally across all of our brands, which has been kind of amazing. And so we're seeing like double to triple subscription signups, which is just amazing. So like that has been great. Obviously there's been challenges on the ad side as all media companies have dealt with. We're doing everything we can to mitigate as much as we possibly can any of those hard decisions that most companies have to make right now. Of course, we're going through our own version of that. I think really our number one goal is obviously to the safety of our employees and to the health of our employees. It's to the efficacy of our brands and how we continue to make a quality product. And I think some of the ways that we're mitigating cost is happening very organically, right? I mean, if I think about how we're creating video content right now, we're not doing it in big studios. We're able to do it from home, and our team has been, Conde Nast Entertainment has been extremely successful because we're an unscripted production house that is making tons of great content from their homes, and that just comes with reduced cost. We're not traveling. I mean, that intuitively is helping us save a lot of money right now. Usually I would be on multiple planes in multiple parts of the world. And
well, it would have been in the New Front. This week would have been New Fronts.
I mean, literally
so
Tuesday.
People coming into New York to present, and there would have been all of those, costs associated with that.
100%. And like, T&E, I mean, just spending time with clients that, going out to dinner, I'm having amazing, granola bar lunches with my clients, and I'm not taking them to Nobu, right? So we're seeing lots of intuitive ways in which cost is just getting mitigated. Yes, of course.
Do you think those will carry over post-pandemic? Do you think we'll see travel change? Do you think we'll see, that kind of entertaining, especially in the publishing world, change? And it has already, but do you expect it to be, shifted further?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, I think this idea that consumer behavior won't change is just insane. I mean, consumer behavior is changing. It will change. I think, we say at Conde that, true luxury is meaning and context. So I think consumers are going to have to redefine what meaning and context means. It doesn't mean that people aren't going to travel. It's going to be how they travel. I think there's going to be a lot more local travel probably happening for a period of time. One thing that I think we're also realizing through this process, just getting back to the efficiency side, is there's lots of things we can do from our homes, and there's lots of things that we can do without getting on a plane. Not that we won't need to or want to, but we're realizing that there's ways that we can continue to live a more efficient, I think a more, just I don't know, just like there's conversations that I'm having with clients, and I'm like, wow, I would have went all the way to Milan to have this conversation, and we just did it in 10 minutes, right? And so I do feel that this is teaching us something that will carry over into 2021 and forever, right? That there's just going to be a different way that we can connect. That's number one. Number two, I think the way that people define luxury, I think space is going to be something that's going to be a new way that people want to experience their lives, right? Like having space, I think it's something people are going to look for a while. Or on the flip side, people might go the other direction, in which they've had so much space for so long. maybe they'll, really crave that, that connection with lots of people around them. But yes, I think there's going to be lots of change for forever. I think all big crises has probably changed us in ways that got us to this point today.
One of the things that'll be interesting to see, which has been big for, the media business currently, is, events, the events business.
Right.
And what that means if we are looking for more space, if travel is being, curtailed, like what does the events business look like 6 months, a year from now? How are you guys thinking about live events and transitioning into virtual events?
Well, so I would put that into two different buckets. First of all, people are going to want to have like in-person experiences. I don't think that's going to go away. I don't think people are going to, not want to go see Beyonce in concert, or not want to have, an amazing dinner at a restaurant. I think all of that will come back. I think it may look different for a little bit. I also think there's going to probably be this transition from these bigger mass events to more of these micro experiences. I think people are going to feel more comfortable probably in smaller spaces, or in spaces with less people. But I also think there's opportunity here, right? I mean, I think there's lots of moments of, we've been looking to evolve and modernize lots of different experiences that I think are going to be super innovative through this period of time. I think, just even when I think about like the Met as an example, which has been this very exclusive moment, and it will continue to be, this opportunity that has now played out over the last few years, where consumers can watch the Met from their homes and actually like tune in. That's a way that they can experience the Met without obviously being there. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of that live stream, access through technology. AI, I'm sure, will really have a moment here as well. But I also think that this concept of virtual events, I don't know, I think that there's going to be a moment in time where they're going to be really important and necessary. And I think it allows consumers, forget about the advertisers, an opportunity to still have experiences and still experience the things that they love. And so I do think that will play out for a period of time. And then I think as time goes on, I think people will start coming back to more of those in-person experiences. And I think that, the world isn't going to change so that like we won't be able to go to our favorite concerts anymore. I think it's just going to take a minute.
I'm here with Pam Drucker Mann, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them on our social channels. Right now, we have one from Rafiq on LinkedIn. Is it the right decision to reduce costs of advertising budgets during the pandemic?
I mean, listen, if you look at like every major third-party report that's ever been reported, advertising during a pandemic is the best possible time. And I'll give you a couple reasons why. Some of them are kind of intuitive, right? I mean, just imagine like you advertise for a couple of reasons. One is to brand market, right? So brand awareness, like how do you drive more awareness to your brand? How do you bring on a new consumer? How do you get them to change their preferences? And the second is to drive, very specific product messaging. And so both in this period of time are kind of amazing opportunities, because right now just think about Conde Nast, like we've got 40% increase in traffic at a time when I think the stat is right now that 82% of advertisers have pressed pause on their ad campaigns. So imagine you have consumers way leaned in at a time when advertisers are actually like nowhere. And so what this is for the advertisers that are present is, one, it's a great time to be an underdog and be in the marketplace, because it gives you an opportunity to steal some share away from, some of those folks that have had number one for the last however many years, right? And the way you can do that is that, you have to reach a certain amount of people and penetrate a certain amount of the audience in order to break through. And this is amazing breakthrough time. No one else is competing with you. So you've got the airtime. And then the second is that it's this unbelievable time to, really kind of walk into a marketplace when consumers are vulnerable. They are changing their behavior. They are thinking differently. They are willing to try new things. And so even though there's been challenges for some marketers who are like, hey, listen, our doors are closed. We have no distribution. Like, what would we even be advertising? My argument would be, hey, like, if you define your entire relationship with your customer based on your doors being open or your distribution being accessible, that's the wrong way to look at it. The relationship you have with your customer should be fluid. It should be constant. And you should be able to maintain that relationship. And in a weird way, like, not you should, it is the most important thing to maintain that relationship, especially during a crisis.
It's interesting, that word fluid. I wonder too, like, what forms of innovation might come out of all of this? Is there anything, internally that you are all thinking about as it relates to innovating during this time, and what consumers might need right now that they didn't need 3 months ago?
100%. I mean, I do think that, like, okay, there's the obvious, right? So consumers have been like hoarding essential items. But I think as they're hoarding essential items, again, they are trying new things because they have to. It's forcing them to try, beauty products they never would have tried before. And so, like, what is the staying power of that? So that's number one. I think the innovation aspect of this is really interesting, because I think one is, or two, consumers are going to really realize through this period of time all the excess that they had. Like, do I really need all those things that I was using before? I'm doing just fine with just like these 2 or 3 items. And so how do you become the 2, 3 items that they need? The innovation part of it, I think, is really important, because I think ultimately how we think about the connection we have with our consumer is about a couple of things. One is, so many advertisers for a long time have said, well, we have a direct relationship with our advertiser. And so we're innovating all these new ways of, building that relationship through product. And I think what they're realizing through this process is that we have to think about that relationship through content and context. And that innovation can be defined in many different ways. I would also just add that as we think about targeting in terms of data moving forward, one of the things that's going to come out of this is, how are you, number one, going to make sure that you get your loyal customer back when your doors open? And two, how are you going to find that new customer? So with, the reality is there's a massive opportunity to innovate in the way that you connect with, the customer you don't even have yet. And again, like I said, we have to look at these moments in times as marketers as like real opportunities, not just challenges. Yeah. Like, this is this moment in which you have the opportunity also to innovate a product line, right? So if you think about the fact that how many consumers have now opened themselves up to doing their own hair color, and if you're a beauty company that hasn't, well, listen, I mean, if you're a beauty company that hasn't even gone down that route, I mean, maybe this is a good time to start thinking about that. So I think there's innovation in product. I think there's going to be innovation in technology. I definitely think there's innovation in content. I mean, you can see what's happening from a content perspective that's like fascinating. And I think all those things are going to just change the way, that marketers come out of this, let alone how they get through this.
Right.
And same with media companies.
We have a question from Tercha Blue on Twitter. Have there been any unexpected content trends? I know you mentioned, food before, but anything that's, surprising that, marketers might want to lean into?
I mean, the interesting thing is that, you have to think about some of the obviouses. I will say that the food content piece has been huge. I mean, the success we've seen with Bon Appetit is paramount. I mean, I think, we always knew that this brand was great and was doing really well coming into the crisis. But I think the trend in terms of just people cooking a lot more, that's not going to go away. I think that is going to just keep moving quicker and faster. I think what's interesting is, some of the trends that we're seeing on the entertainment side, definitely like lots of things that we were seeing before in terms of binge watching, but like what people are binge watching, the range is fascinating. Everything from like, obsession with Kylie Jenner's new hair to like, the vaccine that is going to change the world. So in some ways, I think what we're seeing is that the trends that were here before COVID are accelerating even faster. I think there's been some weird ones, obviously, around like the science of medicine. Yeah. I think people are really leaned in on. I know with some of our brands, like we're experiencing a lot of interesting questions about, the different kind of, I would just say like the celebrities that are making the content. I think a lot more exposure to, the inside of people's homes. So there's lots of obsessions with like people's homes in a bigger way than I think there were before. Yeah, I mean, I would say that like it's kind of the obviouses, right. But it's also opening us up to some new stuff too.
Yeah, speaking of talent, we have a couple interesting questions on that front. One from Nina on Twitter. How does Conde Nast leverage their talent network to create content during social distancing?
That's such a good question. I mean, I think, I don't know if anybody's been watching SNL, you can see like, every host is, hosting from their homes right now. I think Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks before that. The awesome thing about working with talent right now is like, again, like we're all in the same boat. So it's kind of relative. So for us, it's really been about working with talent in all the ways that we've worked with them in the past, but just kind of do it in the way that we're doing now. I mean, I'm on this podcast from home, and somehow this live stream was still able to happen. A lot of the ways that we're creating content now is, still working with talent who's willing to do it with us from their home in exciting kind of fun ways. And I don't think the expectation of the consumer is any different from that. In a way, it's like, that's what they expect. They expect to see you at home right now, like they are. And so there's really been no difference, actually. I mean, it was different in the beginning, and I think there was a scramble in the beginning, like, oh my God, like, will we be able to work for celebrities, and how will we shoot these people? And I think the entertainment world has pivoted quite quickly. I think that's been the most inspiring, to be honest, thing I've witnessed, is how, in a weird way, the creatives are, they just create. And I think sometimes in times like this, you asked about innovation. I think I've never been more inspired by what the creative world is doing than I have been during this period of time. And I've been really impressed with our brands and our editors in particular.
The level of intimacy, I think, was a good point in terms of like consumers being in the homes of celebrities and, sort of the not polished necessarily content that maybe, 6 months ago, people would have been like, what is this? I think they appreciate, and it helps like humanize everyone, I think, to some extent. So I do think that that's been interesting on a content side. A question on influencer marketing. Do you think this will have a positive impact on influencer marketing, as more content is being created at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting in terms of trend is I think that there's been this kind of redefinition of like, having followers doesn't make you an influencer. So I think that bubble already burst, like, coming into 2020. I think what we're seeing right now, actually, which is kind of interesting across the board, is that, the companies, the brands with the strongest connections are the ones that are going to command the most influence. And so I don't think it's just because I don't think anybody who has, a phone at home is going to be able to create content. Not every, the reality is while there's no advertisers, there's tons of content creators, and consumers are inundated, right? They're getting, there's like 1,000 things they could watch. I think
that was always true. I mean, that pre or post this, I think that's
correct. So now there's
true.
Now there's just more things to watch, right? So my point is that I think what consumers are looking for, again, as I said earlier, is meaning and context. Like someone that can tell them what to watch is like half the battle. It's like, really, you think this is really good? Awesome, I'll watch it right now. And so I do think that the true influence is you're seeing it right now. I mean, you're seeing it through companies like Netflix that are creating really great content. You're seeing it through Conde Nast and Conde Nast brands like Bon Appetit, as I mentioned, like Architectural Digest, like Vogue. I mean, we're seeing that rise. I mean, that's what's crazy. So that influence is there in such a massive way. I don't believe, I just read this article this morning about the micro influencer. I think it's going to be actually tough for the micro influencer to really break out right now, because again, like I said, you've got so much content to watch. And so I think consumers, the bar is just getting higher, right? Consumers are going to really the bar is going to get higher. They're going to be looking for better quality. They're going to be looking for, content they really feel like they can connect to. And it doesn't mean there won't be some that break through, and there will be. But I really do believe how we define influence moving forward is really going to be paramount in terms of, how we think about marketing, especially.
On another end, we'll talk a little bit about ad tech for a minute. A question from Alex on LinkedIn. In the spirit of innovation in the midst of the crisis, do we see a fight to automation? Does programmatic become more relevant as an efficient mechanism for delivery or execution?
Yes, 100%. I mean, I think we were already going there. I think, a couple things. One is advertisers want self-serve products. I mean, they want to be able to just get in there and do it themselves. I think, what's happening right now, I mean, again, like programmatic is going to do well because there's a lot of content. So scarcity, isn't the problem right now. And so, biddable inventory is going to do very well during this period of time. I do think automation is going to continue. I think one of the things that, we're seeing at Conde Nast right now is really just a shift in terms of the way we're partnering with our clients, even through like affiliate strategies. So if you think about that, the ability to, provide a self-service product back to an advertiser who's looking to just, buy into the content, which is very, very similar to what Amazon does actually. And I think self-service across the board, I think is going to be something that is going to continue to, change the way that the ad market not just wants to buy, but can buy as more of those products become available. I think, I think it's a no-brainer. And it's an ease of doing business, right? People, if they don't have to, just think about all the other ways that we live right now. If you can do it yourself, it just makes it a lot easier.
Another question from Mateo on LinkedIn. How do you see the print industry shifting 6 months from now?
So this is such an interesting question. I was literally just talking about this yesterday with a client. So some of the data that we're seeing right now is fascinating. There's been lots of reports that, new media or non-traditional media is going to do better than traditional, like print is going to struggle and digital is going to do better. And, what I would say is interesting in Q2 in particular, if you look across the board at all media companies, everyone is doing poorly, like all platforms. This isn't just like a print issue. It's been everywhere. But what we're seeing on the consumer side, which is fascinating, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, is newsstand sales are actually up. Subscription sales for magazines is way up. And we're seeing a huge growth surge there. And we're seeing this globally, which is fascinating. And you asked me earlier about experiences. And one of the things that I thought is fascinating about the data I just shared with you is that biggest growth we're seeing there is actually coming from 18 to 24-year-olds. And so these aren't people coming back to magazines. These are people probably seeing magazines for the first time. They're probably like, what is this physical thing? This is amazing. And so I actually think what could come out of this is if you think about the experience needing to come to your home as a part of our new normal and our future, I do think magazines offer a different type of experience than your mobile phone can, right? And so it'll be interesting to see actually how the consumer continues to respond to magazines and newspapers, quite frankly, which is also seeing growth from consumers right now. How this continues to grow over the next 6 months to a year, and does this shift consumer behavior a little bit? Does this exposure to magazines for 18 to 24-year-olds like continue? And we don't know that yet. But I think it'll be really interesting, really interesting to watch.
On a personal level, like what experiences or like content areas are you leaning into? What things are you trying to like do to stay creative and keep your, boys entertained?
Well, okay, I'm going to start like at the end of the day and then back into the beginning. So like at the end, so like that's literally
the worst part of the day to the start of the new one.
Yeah, I mean, literally the end of the day is like, everything is about just getting to the end of the day. So, it's a combination of like argument with my wife between like, can I watch the Ozarks? We're in season 3 now, which I'm obsessed with. And like, and not to like, again, plug my own show, but like I'm obsessed with Bon Appetit right now because like I've been forced to become the chef in my home. So watching as much of that as I can possibly get. I just watched a really great documentary. I've been watching a ton of documentaries. Like that's the other thing, like documentaries have like changed my life. But in terms of like that, so like that level of stimulation or lack thereof, I think shutting down at the end of the day is like the most important thing that I can do. Just turn off, be entertained. And then I think, being creative in terms of just finding any way that we can to be physical and get outside and we have to like run our kids like horses. So like, or they basically like legitimately will burn our house down. So it is, what can we do to keep them busy? What kind of exercises can we give them? How do we keep them quiet? I mean, that's literally what this entire, it is like a miracle right now that you haven't heard one of my children. So it's like, how do we get through that? And, we're also having, I'll just say this, there's something kind of, family, something about it that's been really nice in terms of just being able to spend that kind of time with your family that you just never would have been able to spend before. And so that quality time is something that I think we feel very blessed to have. And
hopefully morphs over into post-pandemic, something we can kind of all keep in our professional and personal lives.
Totally agree.
A special thank you to Ad Colony for supporting this episode of Ad Age Remotely. Thank you, Pam, for joining us, and thank you for everyone for watching.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And stay tuned. Tomorrow, I will be live with Quibi co-founder Meg Whitman. So join in around 1 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.